Hello, everybody. Welcome to our colloquium session entitled What Distant Learning Means for ELT, Challenges and Best Practices. This is a colloquium in charge of regional affiliates. My name is Jesus Sosa from Ventisol, and my team also includes Larissa Lopez from Puerto Rico TISO and Juana Espinosa Dayestas from ELTA TISO. It is an honor for us to be here sharing the different experiences in our countries and sharing some knowledge with you. So the plan we have for this colloquium is we're going to start defining what ERT means to us and why we say ERT instead of distance learning for context. Then for a second part, each one of us is going to share the experience of their own country. You're going to have Juana with Honduras, Larissa presenting Puerto Rico, and then you're going to have me presenting my experience in Venezuela, the common practices for each one and the situation we have. Then, as a final part, we're going to have the common best practices and considerations from the presenter's experience, like from all of the experience we had, the common points, we're going to present some considerations and then the conclusions. So, as a first part, we're going to start talking about challenges and best practices. And for this, the first step is talking about why emergency remote teaching and not just online teaching. Another term that has been used globally is online teaching and distance learning. But for us, it has been more an emergency remote teaching situation. Why? Because we're talking about several teachers or most teachers who don't have experience or training on distance learning. We're talking about institutions that were not prepared for this situation. We're also talking about changes that needed to be done in a matter of hours or days because we didn't even have any weeks. And of course, there's another one that we're talking about, a temporary situation, which doesn't happen with online learning. Emergency remote teaching encompasses, in this case, the pandemic, but at some point is going to be over, and some countries are even transitioning from one point to another one. But emergency remote teaching still remains. So now I give the voice to Professor Juana Espinosa, who is going to present the experience at Honduras.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for being here. This is our colloquium about remote emergency teaching. And now I am going, as Jesus said, my name is Juana Dayestas, and I am going to talk a little bit about emergency remote teaching and the situation in Honduras. Well, talking about education, education area has been shaken since teachers and students have to change their teaching and learning process from one day to another. It was totally new for them to study under a 100 virtual program, and the two Honduran educational systems have been involved in this situation are the private system, and that regarding this private education sector, it has been affected since parents have financial issues that don't allow them to pay the tuition and monthly payments, incurring on administrative problems and the risk to stop the academic activity. Furthermore, private schools have more access to digital resources, what makes easier their teaching practice. Now, talking on the other hand, we in the public system sector has been implemented a virtual format to continue with the academic program. In this area, teachers have some limitations to teach because of the digital technology access. Regarding the students, it is more difficult for them to learn under this new methodology because of the lack of digital resources in their homes, as well as the environment involved in this situation to achieve the new knowledge. Students from the public education system, especially from the rural area, have more connectivity problems. For some parents, it is difficult for them to decide what to do, to buy internet for their sons or to buy food. For some teachers, this is a situation that in which they have to be using their cell phones to teach through WhatsApp. Others are visiting their students in their community to check homework and assign something else. For some students, the TV is the mean to learn during this pandemic crisis. But what about remote teaching? Remote teaching in pandemic times is making teachers to innovate a way to teach as well as to communicate with students. And also it has been a change from traditional to independent learning. The rural area has been more impacted because of the limited access to digital technology, electricity, and educational resources, making this a real sacrifice for teachers and students that want to be an agent of change for our country. The remote teaching has to do with the teachers working from home, dealing with the student emotions towards the crisis affecting on their lifestyles, the student stress and vulnerabilities. The remote teaching has to do with students learning from home, facing hardships and trying to be adapted to a new learning environment without the classroom conditions. And the remote teaching and learning has to do with the lack of motivation because of the pandemic effects in all the life stages.
Okay, so when it comes to Puerto Rico, it's not that different than what Honduras has been facing as well as other countries. But our particular case may be a bit different because it began in January 6th with a chain of earthquakes that we faced early in the year, which affected our country greatly. These are some of the effects of the earthquakes. So several schools were damaged, meaning, and then they also had to be inspected each and every time an earthquake happened. So which limited the time students were able to be in the classroom. It limited the time teachers had to plan, teachers had to move from their classrooms into their home in order to possibly start school. This was early in January. So it was the beginning of the last year. So the beginning of the other academic year, right? So this school, this was in Guanica in the southern east parts of the island, which was completely devastated and demolished. So all the students and their families, as well as the rest of the community, had to be moved into camps and tents, and that's how they were living. So their education was greatly affected. And the Department of Education, the Puerto Rico Department of Education, also known as PRDE, tried to resolve this by building or by assembling schools, whether it was outside under carps or tarps, and then inside gymnasiums, and trying to divide and make the best of that situation. Since schools were not inspected properly, no one could enter any school, no administrators, which halted the movements and education processes greatly. After that came the pandemic. In March 15th was when the government lockdown begins. And it began very abruptly. In April, the emergency remote teaching officially from the Puerto Rico Department of Education, right, from the PRDE, that's when it was activated in April, right? And so the final decision when emergency remote teaching was not being as effective was that students will remain with their grades from the beginning of the year. So the grades from January to May were basically halted. So if you had any hopes of improving your grades in the next semester, that was last year, that was not possible back then, or after that happened. After that, in August, we began our school year, is when our school years traditionally begin for the public and private sector. The private sector did face many difficulties. Many private schools did have to close and moved to other private schools, or the parents had to enroll them into public school, which is tended to be the minority of the movements, mostly from private to another private school that had better means or that was able to stay open. As for the public school sector, it began in August. It was halted for, I think, 2 weeks, so it started 2 weeks after the private sector, and they decided to pursue remote teaching via Microsoft Teams, which is the free platform that was provided to them. From that not being as successful, there was a team of, or Department of Education was trying to give out computers. They handed out a very small amount of them, and then figuring out that not a lot of students, or most students, don't have access to reliable internet, not even reliable power service or electricity. They don't have all the necessary services or devices or tools to carry out remote teaching. They decided to create modules. These modules were published in September, which are basically printable modules for families without internet services or devices to use. And so the plan was for them to go to the school, print out the modules, or have or pick up the module and then complete them at home. But then the problem with these modules is that it's all in English. And so because English is taught here as a second language, not many parents necessarily have the proper resources or necessarily all the tools or all the skills to help their students or their children with the academic language that are printed in the module. And so now new activities that are going on is that other associations, including also Pierre TESOL, are now working on videos for the public sector to help them with their lessons, to help understand the lessons printed on the modules and the instructions printed on the modules. So there's now a secondary or third job that has to be done in order for the students to get proper education. And we've seen, or it's been evidenced, that they are even struggling with, or the schools are even struggling with printing the modules. So it's been very chaotic, the beginning of the year, the end of last year, the last academic year. And so we're still in recovery, and will probably still affect and continue to affect education and students and the future of the country. So a little bit more on the positive news on what Pierre TESOL is doing for its members during crisis. We've extended our membership, or we gave a few free months from March to June, so no expirations happened, for them to receive all the information that we were publishing for remote teaching or online school or digital learning and all that. We provide online workshops. Some are free, but then all are free for members, and then some are lowered prices, or most are lowered prices for non-members. We have more webinars that are coming out, which are Pierre TESOL First, divided by levels, targeting each educational level. So as much information that we can get out there for the teachers here in Puerto Rico and abroad, the best we are, the best we feel, because we're sharing at least what's working for us in order for to help others who might be struggling in specific areas. We also introduced a new award, which is the Exceptional Volunteer Service Award, for members that are going above and beyond in their communities to improve education and improve their community's stance, or their, how they are developing. Next, we are giving away raffles, or we're raffling away free memberships in all our events to help, ease the burden or ease the membership charge for some people who are involved in our activities. We're also giving away discounts to the annual convention. And then we're forming alliances with Puerto Rico Department of Education. We helped edit the modules. And then others to help sponsor teachers to go to conventions, also sponsoring them. We have awards that are for grants and scholarships for them, for teachers to use however they deem fit as in their role as teacher, as a teacher. So whether it be to buy supplies or to buy materials for students, or buy supplies for the teacher, as much as we can do to help others, the best we try to do. And next, I'm going to leave you with Jesus, and he's going to present what is happening in Venezuela.
Okay, so as Juana mentioned, and also Larissa, our contexts are not too different. In the case of Venezuela, something that we all know is that this is a context of multiple crises that now had a serious global health crisis, and we have to learn how to strive and go. In the case of schools, public and private schools, the Ministry of Education created the Plan Cada Familia Una Escuela. And I'm going to focus just on that because universities were more or less left on their own. Even if there is a plan, for political reasons, universities have been left on their own. And for schools and those students, there is the Plan Cada Familia Una Escuela. It sounds like a great plan. It encompasses many, many projects and strategies of the government that include Canaimitas, tablets, something called Colección Bicentenario, which is like an encyclopedia, a digital library, a magazine called Tricolor, and some strategies called like los carteles pedagógicos, las cartas pedagógicas, social media use, something called Préstame tu cuaderno, which is for remote settings, something that is called La valija viajera, something called El megáfono pedagógico, El maestro Pueblo Orienta, which is using people from the origins and the places to be part of the education system. Las cartas pedagógicas, la bitácora del supervisor, Tú me cuidas, yo te cuido, and a food program, and the use of portfolios. It is an ambitious plan. It encompasses everything that the government has proposed, but as some of the elements that has happened with those previous plans, there is not a true digital transformation, and there is not an encouragement for developing digital literacy skills. And again, they are all happening in a context with a multiple crisis where teachers have to solve all the situations basically by their own, and they're going to see why. And they don't have the means on how to do so. And with this one, I'm going sadly with payments. I just don't want to get to there, but they just, even if they wanted to, they cannot do so because they don't have the means to do so. So let's take a look at the next slide to see a little more in detail what I'm saying here. In this slide, we have some of the elements of the plan of this Cada Familia Una Escuela. It is about preventive information dissemination actions from the school to the family and community. It's a joint work, supposed to be. And it's a presentation organized from the pedagogical point of view of the contents, curricular components, and pedagogical learning strategies. There were files created for every level, kindergarten, primary school, secondary school, for every term. They shared information. There was something created that was shared via email, via WhatsApp groups on the circuits. I'm part of one of those circuits, and we received some of that information. It also encompasses the use of printed and digital media. As I told you, all of the material that they have brought to school, supposedly, and all of the one they have on their digital libraries. And also consultations for all school zone heads, all sectors of private, Catholic, and subsidized education also, because it's not just about public education. The thing is, reality speaks in our country. That is the plan. It sounds beautiful. It sounds amazing if you combine it with all the things I said, but reality speaks. We live in a context in multiple crises. So including a pandemic on top of that makes it that much more difficult to reach to our students. 13 to 28% of inhabitants of Venezuela own fixed telephony, which is already difficult. 83 to 93 own a television, so the use of media on that one could work well. 12 to 32% own home internet. So you can see a difference from Larissa and Juana, how difficult it becomes when only a top of 32% in all the inhabitants of Venezuela own an internet connection. And 17 from 41 own a computer. And then most of us own cell phones, and strategies have been applied on mobile learning, but then more than 50% of the population of Venezuela has daily problems with internet and phone services. In case of people of my region, you have gaps of electricity of 8, 12 hours, 18 hours, and then you still need to do all of those elements. But then what does this mean for ELT, which is a matter? Let's see on the next slide. Okay, it means WhatsApp has become a platform of choice because it's the one that you can use from your phone. It has tools that you can use to develop reading, writing, speaking, and listening activities. Is low connectivity enough? This is a key for Venezuela. Low connectivity call strategies. It is what we need to do. Also, public spaces have become new spaces to teach and learn. Some of our squares in downtown, they have Wi-Fi connection, or if not, phone services work well because there are antennas from the companies. So some people are actually teaching on the squares, or teachers are moving on bicycles, going for their students' houses, or some schools have adapted some spaces for teachers if they manage to get there to work. Strategies in Venezuela must be planned to teach both students and parents, because for us, English is a foreign language. The only place where most students get to practice is in the classroom, and their parents need to support them, but their parents don't speak English. So strategies need to be adapted to teach parents too, especially when it comes to kids. Otherwise, there will be nothing to do because it's a teacher alone with a group of 30 or 40 students. Families have become more disconnected with the learning of EFL because living in such a crisis, having to do all of the work of the schools, English is one of the courses, is one of the subjects, but you lose the contact because you don't have much more to do than the assignments that the teacher gives you. So they get disconnected. And that's why coping with other subjects has made teachers, EFL teachers, to simplify activities. Some schools have decided to have like one activity for 3 classes for a whole week. So that means English gets to send activities maybe once or twice a month, or maybe for a period of 1 week to do the activities. So activities have had to be simplified, and therefore a lot of adaptation has needed to be done, especially because most of our teachers don't own an actual book to work with unless they are on the public education system who have the Colección Bicentenaria. They have to adapt a lot. It's more about quality than quantity, but as we have seen now, we have so many restrictions that even if you try to have more quality, the content itself, it's hard enough for a student to record a video, to have the audio, to create an infographic, for example. So we try to make it more quality than quantity, but it's still hard. Not impossible, but it means it's harder, okay? Development of the oral skills in Venezuela has been left a little aside for more grammar translation related strategies, because those tend to be the ones students can do offline, because we're going a lot with electronic, but not online. So they do those activities offline, and oral skills has been restricted in that way, because sometimes students, even since they don't have a computer, they write the stuff, they take a picture and they send the picture. And that's what the teacher has to work with, because that's the only thing the student has. And teachers are craving for professional development. And that is the importance of having associations such as Ventisol, because we have created programs as the Ventisol e-teacher training program. We have webinar, we have Instagram live sessions, we have our social media. We have created WhatsApp groups for every region or every state, and teachers keep just asking This morning we had a webinar and teachers say, we need more, we want more, we need to have this. Because even though we have been in pandemic and teaching in ERT modality, it has been 6 months. Teachers still need and crave for professional development. And that makes associations such as Ventisol important on this matter.
So some of the best practices that we've all seen or we have shared are the following. So know when to have synchronous and asynchronous classes or activities or practice sessions. Know that some activities, especially if it's group work, might involve doing it outside of the live hours or the online hours. Think of a platform that would allow you to gather several resources in one place, like the case of Venezuela, where they use WhatsApp mostly. In Puerto Rico, the Department of Education is using Microsoft Teams. For PRT, so we're using Livestorm. Zoom is also one that is frequently used, both in the public and private sector. There's also Google Meet. Like Jesus was saying, WhatsApp is a low power or a low internet usage, which helps when we don't have, like the case of Puerto Rico as well, we don't have necessarily reliable internet service. Next, it is more about quality than quantity. So don't bombard them with many activities because you're trying to cover your curriculum. Focus on what is essential, what is more important, and then make that fruitful. Think of websites and tools that are optimized that will help you ease the learning that you're doing. We gave a workshop in PRTSO with the tool or the resource of Class Dojo, which has worked excellently for many other teachers. Also, Seesaw is a great tool that is being used in Puerto Rico very flawlessly. Next, be flexible, or think about including flexibility in both time and in format delivery, right? Some students only have accessibility through a phone or through a parent's phone. So that's something to think about. Make sure you present a program with specific details on activities and what is expected of you and from you and what is expected of them in detail. If you can repeat it in whatever or translate it in whatever language is better for them. Think about, you know, others who might not be as fluent in the language that we're teaching. Next, provide clear instructions. Right now, my biggest recommendation is to provide instructions in both languages, English and Spanish, or whichever language is next to being the majority, yeah. So that, you know, the amount of misinformation or misunderstandings is limited. Also, put yourself in the place of your students and what they are going through. Think of the load that the load that they're carrying with their families and within their communities. Some might have, you know, family members who are hospitalized or going through serious illnesses, or really struggling financially through the pandemic crisis. So think of them and whatever struggles they might be going through, and hopefully see if you can help them out in some way. And next, it's important, or the importance of teacher associations. So teaching is a profession of community, right? When we're teachers or beginning in our teacher stage, we feel scared, or at least I felt scared and a little anxious into not knowing where I was going or who to talk to or how can I make my lessons better. And I always look out for and contact other teachers and see what's working for them. How can I approach a student who is being particularly, you know, demanding, And so we are being asked to do a lot. So then also communicate that whenever possible and figure out what times work for you and what times will work better for some parents. Another consideration or a super tip is to find some time for yourself as well. Of course, we always tend to look out for our students and their parents and our communities and everything, but find time for yourself as well.
Well, and as you were listening, this is it says emergency remote teaching, and we are into or in the middle of a crisis in which education is suffering the consequences. And after that, we want to sum up with some conclusions that are relevant to mention in this setting in which we are discussing about this important topic. Well, as we were listening, for us, we conclude that the new information and previous experience have made teachers more conscious about their practice, and we are moving slowly from ERT scenario to actual distance learning education. Some contexts have even moved to blended settings, trying to adapt to this new reality, making them plan and adapt even more strategies to fulfill their role as facilitators. And on the other hand, after this experience, the need to develop digital literacy and core skill has become even more important, both for teachers and students, not to mention the whole community involved in the teaching and learning process. Well, and this is at the end of our presentation. We are more than happy to share with you about our situations in our countries. Thank you very much for your attention.